vacation, but I assume we were going to talk about GA.
Oh yeah. So a couple of us kind of started some discussion, and we want to ask the community also. So 123 is going to ship very soon, right? Sometime in August, so hopefully next week. And we need to start think about 124 and what can we do with Ambient. So as far as I know, we do have users running Ambient in production. We are interested in knowing what can we, because a lot of users I talk to, I travel to a lot of places to conferences, and the constant feedback I heard is, when is Ambient going to be production ready, right? So typically user interpret as beta is not production ready, even though we say it's production ready with precaution. But people still think, when is Ambient going to GA, or when is Ambient going to be production ready? That's like the number one question I always heard from our users when I go to different places. So I want to start some discussion. Can we start making Ambient towards stable, particularly in the areas of Ambient that we declare beta in 1.22, right? So it would be 2 releases for those functions. It would be 2 releases, and we had users kicking tires. We had users running in production, some user. And so can we start to promote these functions that's already in beta to stable in 124? Is that realistic? I want to pause a minute to hear other people's feedback.
Is there a good list somewhere of, I've forgotten some of the things that we said were beta versus not beta in 122. Is there a list of those? Are those in a list somewhere?
Yes, I wrote a blog about it. Let me find a blog really quickly.
I thought you did, but I couldn't remember if it was blog or doc.
Yeah, we have, I think John had a very detailed doc. I basically took his doc and kind of massage it to a little bit of the impact level that user mostly care about, and and turn it into a blog so it's more user facing. Yeah. Because typically in Istio, we do recommend features sit in beta for at least a release or 2 before they are promoted to stable. So I think targeting these already in beta in 122 makes sense. Obviously, this doesn't mean we can't promote the rest of the Ambient. We can still promote the rest of the Ambient, whether they are alpha or beta. But for stable, I think these are the ones that makes most sense.
In a universe where silence is assent sometimes, does anybody disagree with Lynn's general assertion? I don't, just for the record, but I also want to make sure that we're a little bit more positive about our consensus.
Yeah, we have folks from other companies, so you guys probably have interacted different user base than I am. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, Michael, anybody else.
I can give my 2 cents, which I was going to say for a while, but I didn't realize my mic was not working. Yeah, I think like in my mind, it's kind of a continuation of what we talked about in the last thing. It's like obviously we need to be driving towards stable. The question is, what are the requirements to get there, and when do we want to target it? In my mind, if we look at what it means to be stable, it doesn't mean that it has every feature under the sun. It means that what we do have is solid, dependable. We recommend it to essentially arbitrary users, not just cutting edge ones, and that will have backwards compatibility. So based on that, what we need to do is not go through the list of all the features that we haven't implemented yet and do them. We need to make sure that we meet those criteria. I think we're not super far off at this point. To me, kind of what we need to do, like there's really two areas: the stability, which is about getting a level of trust with our level of testing and real world usage. I think we have a little ways to go on the real world usage. Like it would be very nice to have a large scale or multiple large scale production public customers, because people like that will always find issues that we didn't think about. We've gotten a lot of good feedback from, well, we don't necessarily know the scale or the scope of all the deployments, but we've gotten a lot of feedback already that we've addressed. So we're heading in the right direction, but we don't have like some of the big names that we have in sidecars. And then there's whether we can commit to the current APIs and whatnot. For the most part, I haven't really seen proposed changes. So unless something comes up, I'm feeling pretty confident there. But those to me are the two big areas that we need to consider and then work back from there.
So traditionally, sorry, Gotham, you had your hand up first. Go ahead.
No, can you go ahead, go ahead.
Traditionally, we've not permitted features to move forward to GA until they're compatible with our other GA features, or even our other beta features in many cases. So things like multi-cluster have been blockers for other features in the past, and I would expect would be a blocker before we can call Ambient stable. And then I echoed Ben's concerns on the install, upgrade, UX, and APIs.
I completely disagree with Mitch. I mean, the whole idea was that in Ambient, we can fix the problems that we had in regular Istio. So I thought we agreed that, for example, multi-cluster is actually working as intended, but not broken. And again, it's a new API surface. It's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be compatible. If it says that it's supporting the gateway API HTTP route, it doesn't mean that it needs to support all the features from V1 Istio API if it's not there. So that's my point. Was really that what I would like is to have a clear definition of what the API surface is, because that's really the only thing that we should be committed to. If protocols are part of this, we should have a very, very clear definition of the protocol, RFC-like, which is, again, if the protocol is implementation detail, wonderful. If not, it should be clearly stated exactly. I mean, what is stable? I mean, install options, again, is it stable? If it's not stable, it's an API surface that needs to be documented. And we need to be clear that the implementation, may change, may have different implementation, may have multiple implementation, whatever. We discussed about, we want interoperability, we want multiple implementations. This particular implementation is as stable as any, and I completely agree that it doesn't have any clear bugs, but I would like to avoid repeating what we did with Istio, where pretty much we have a big blob. It's stable, which means whatever you want it to mean. I mean, make config settings or whatever else, it's impacting the implementation may or may not be stable, but the API v1 is actually quite stable and good. So, and we don't have that. I mean, we don't have a clear definition of what is the API surface.
Compton, I'd like to follow up and ask, when you say that it's multi-cluster Ambient is working as designed, can you explain what you mean there?
Remember we discussed cluster local should be local, and for non-cluster local, you should have a different syntax, because and there was some change recently even in Istio to allow people to have cluster local kept local for sidecars. So working as intended means it's compatible. You can install Ambient by default in a cluster and you not break anything. That was a design requirement for Ambient from the beginning. And that's not compatible with sidecars, where if you install sidecars by default, you break any applications that is not stateless.
So, but that's not the same as multi-cluster working, right? That's actually not doing multi-cluster in scenarios where we shouldn't. And I'm totally in agreement with you there that we shouldn't just surprise your multi-cluster now. The question is, does multi-cluster work as designed? So if you're not calling cluster.local, does this ambient install exhibit the same features that we have in Sidecar, the ability to traverse between clusters with MTLS using east-west gateways, etc.?
My feeling is that it's a yes. If you restrict your statement to multi-cluster, you can have multi-cluster, for example, by having a gateway and multi-network, by the way, because if you use gateways pretty much every with service entries and the other, you can have a multi-cluster model with Ambient where all the communication is local, is stay in the same cluster for L4, and if you want to reach other clusters, you go to gateways, just like with sidecars if you don't use the secrets. But yeah, I mean, John probably has a better.
As far as I know, that doesn't work. Like if you have an example of that working, I would be very excited to make use of it.
Okay, we have a couple of hands. I'd like to get Niraj and go, and unless somebody wants to address to the discussion right now.
I want to respond to it, but maybe that's what they have.
Okay, yeah, if you want to respond, go ahead. And then we'll go to Niraj next, and then follow the queue.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion is these are all interesting questions, and the proposed scope of GA, which we can debate, obviously, but from Lynn, that I agree with, is that we would not be promoting multi-cluster to stable. So any details about multi-cluster are somewhat irrelevant to the discussion, except for Keith actually had a good question, was do we know enough about what multi-cluster will look like to know if we'll need breaking changes? That is a very good question, I think. But other, like, I don't know. That's my 2 cents. Like, multi-cluster is not beta. It's not very close to beta. It should not be in scope for the initial stable. I mean, we can debate that. I think Mitch or Keith, I forget who, had some discussion on that. But that should be the discussion. How it should behave, happy to talk about that, but it should be orthogonal to the GA discussion in my mind. Yeah, but Louis said, features to include versus the fact that some features are stable are kind of different things.
All right, Niraj, do you want to go next? You had your hands for a while.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. Yeah, sort of following up. I was sort of doing some local testing with the ambient and multi-cluster stuff, and I was sort of discussing this on Slack with John and also with Mitch. But at least from my testing, I mean, I didn't install any waypoints. I just assumed that all for like single network, multi-primary, it would still just work with zTunnel. But if you look at the actual like pod aggregation, I think that's all scoped to a single cluster. But I just wanted to double check if anyone else has tested that, because when I spoke, I messaged some folks at Alibaba, and I think that they worked on some like multi-cluster node authorizer. And they said that in their testing, it was working for them. So I'm not sure if I was just doing something wrong with my setup, or if, like as Costin said, you needed a waypoint for like cross-cluster traffic, or if there was any more guidance on that.
I mean, multi-cluster is effectively partially implemented and untested. So if it happens to work in some cases, cool, I guess. But it's not like it's not, it's not even like we said it's alpha. I don't know why we said that. It should have been in a work in progress feature status in my mind.
Yeah, the only reason we started alpha was I think somebody from Cisco, I forgot his name. I think it was John Dose. He got it working at one point for flat network. We were like, oh, that's so cool. So, but in hindsight, right, we just have maybe one or two limited user got it working in the community.
To be honest, I'm surprised that Istio even starts up because, as far as I know, it should be trying to read Istio authorization policies from all the clusters, which it shouldn't have permission to do, and therefore should not start up. So I'm actually more concerned that it doesn't crash on or block startup, because that tells me that maybe it's has too much permissions that it shouldn't have, or maybe it's not properly blocking when it's not synchronized or something along those lines.
I'm more worried if it works, because that means that it works badly. I mean, in the sense that it's watching clusters and reading cross cluster. I mean, the whole idea of, you should not read secrets or authorization policies from other cluster because you break the boundaries of cluster. So we need to be very careful. I mean, to make sure that users don't accidentally get behaviors that then they will believe that we need to maintain backward compatibility, like we have in Sidecar, where we have a lot of bad behaviors in security wise.
Yeah, I think that's her comment. Awesome.
The reader service
Yeah,
account does have access to read all the Istio resources in other clusters, if that's what you're
Oh,
asking.
really? Ah, okay, that's why. That's crazy. I didn't know. Why
It's
does
not good. I mean, it's wrong. It's a bug, not a feature.
yeah, why does it have that? It doesn't. It's not supposed to read them. Okay, well, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think there is one mode, like one deployment topology where like you have like the config cluster that is remote, and you put config in all the other clusters. We don't. It's not documented super well on deployment topologies, but I do recall seeing it in some older documentation, like having a hub Istio cluster, and it can read all the configuration from all the stoked clusters.
It is actually documented. It's a primary remote cluster, which is documented relatively well, or in the Istio documentation, and that particular mode leaked into the multi-primary or normal mode. And as a result, we have extensive permission. I mean, the whole secret reading from other clusters that I'm trying to fix is a side effect of this primary remote, and a lot of other complicated and very dangerous things that are enabled by default, even if you don't use primary remote.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, I'll go ahead first. Somehow my hands was lower because I was trying to moderate it. So I just want to say, I don't know if Louis or Carsten, I think you guys are in the very early days of Istio when we shift like Istio 1.0, 1.1, right? When we announced production ready, I don't believe we had multi-cluster support. So essentially you have to go to GA at some fashion for people to try it. Then you gradually add more and more functions. So I think Keith, your question is valid. Explore multi-cluster impact, but I don't believe multi-cluster should hold up the basic function of Ambient going into GA.
Yeah, I mean, in the earlier days of Istio, and actually now even, right, you can use service entry and workload entry directly to address workloads in other clusters, right? By effectively pretending that they're in the same cluster as, you don't even have to use an east-west gateway to talk to those endpoints, right? It requires manual maintenance of the discovery to do it, which is the same as what it was like in Istio 1.0. So there are ways to achieve multi-cluster effects today. It's just like choosing a topological pattern for control plane deployment and control plane access for service discovery versus the ability to enable multi-cluster traffic are two different things. And then, as Costin mentioned, also the implicit versus explicit nature of service discovery and service name equivalence across cluster boundaries. That last one, right, really should be an API decision that users make one way or another. right? And there isn't currently an explicit API for that in Istio, which is the thing Costin has been quite reasonably banging on about for a while. But there's a little brief history.
You're on, John. You want to go?
Yeah. I had a question about like in the criteria for like calling multi-cluster a beta or stable. Does that mean each control plane topology from like sidecars is expected to work? Or like could we say certain topologies are supported or certain topologies are beta, but others are still untested? That sounds kind of separate to the whether like ambient itself for a single cluster could be stable or beta, but I was just curious about the criteria for multi-cluster specifically.
I think we get to decide. We don't necessarily have to support everything, right? Like as Costin mentioned, right? Reading across cluster boundaries and assuming a merged environment, which is what Istio sidecar does, could be an anti-pattern. It may not be the thing we should be doing by default for multi-cluster. Conversely, maybe the thing that users want. I don't even know if I think we can make the assumption about how most users use multi-cluster today in the median multi-cluster deployment model, whatever that might be. But it would be a set of assumptions that we're making. Right? And is that assumption true? Right? Like, let's assume the median model is a fairly small number of clusters, and then the big users have maybe large numbers of clusters. Are the assumptions we make for the architectures the same in both cases? Right, we've already picked APIs and deliberately made API choice changes for ambient versus sidecar in terms of at least recommendations. We are free to change the game a little bit. Like we still obviously have to consider migration, but I don't think we have to assume that we're locked into every existing control plane model and discovery model that's supported in sidecar.
So we had a doc that we've used to prioritize what we're working for and what our requirements are for driving to GA. I wonder, looking at this list, if the P1s and P0s listed here have been resolved. I see on here like ambient sidecar interop is a P1 for GA.
Oh, by the way, that was my mistake. This was the doc to beta, right? Sorry, I think I might have changed it accidentally. Sorry about that. So I'm changing back to beta. But your question is still valid, Mitch.
Oh, I see at the top. It does say, that's weird. The doc is called GA, but the title says beta.
Yeah, I think you're right. We did have a doc. Maybe I got confused on the doc. But we did have a doc on drive ambient to beta, and I believe the P0 issue will close. I actually went through most of them recently in GitHub. But actually, let me pull out the beta doc. This might be a different doc. So
here's the beta doc. That's the second link I've sent there.
Okay, I'll pull it out. Yeah, sorry about that.
That's all right. They do look different in terms of the lists that they include and the features. Like sidecar interop, I remember we said was explicitly out of scope for. Oh no, actually, it is included on the beta.
Okay, yeah. So on the beta, the interop, I'm pretty sure it's out. Let's see.
It says P1.
Yeah, P1, so P0, only the P0 are in, right? So if you look at the stabilized ambient API, I believe we did a lot of work on like authorization policy, the waypoint binding, you know, how do you use waypoint? I think that's all relative stable now since before. You know, shout out to Louis, John, and Keith did a lot of work on that. This is deferred, right? Compatibility of with the CNI. I think Yuval and Ben did a lot of work by doing the import, right? So this is solved. Trust and security hardening. I believe Yuval did the work for workload part. Z-tunnel impersonation. There's some edge case. I think Yuval also had some PRA, if I remember correctly. I don't think we tackle any of the P1, P2, and observability. I think John Louis did a lot of work on designing, and Whitney and a couple of other people helped implement. I forgot all the names, so apologies, but it's a community effort. So I believe we did have a strategy for observability, right? And we supported some of the telemetry at waypoint. And certainly we have a good, reasonable integration test coverage. This one, maybe we didn't, I don't remember if we accomplished this one, maybe not. And then the interrupt was, yeah, okay, yeah, that's what
outside of we've got like the feature flags, but beyond that, I don't think there's anything extra.
Yeah, I remember I was trying to ask people for help on this one, and Keith, you were very busy, and I didn't think I was able to get anybody help on that one. And then the interrupt is P1 migration was P1 install. Mitch, shout out to you and many other people in the community. I think all did a lot of work around install. Upgrade too as well. I think, you know, we have Helm upgrade, Mitch, I think you still have PR. I'm not sure if it's merged. So a lot of progress made on this area. Documentation, I think we did tons of work on documentation. And performance testing, I think we published our performance number in preliminary. So that is out there also, if you haven't seen it. Yep, that's the list.
So if these were the P0s for going to beta, I would expect that GA would include the P1s from beta.
That's not necessarily, because the P1s, they need to be in alpha beta first before they can go to GA, right? Because it's like future progression, right? The feature has to be in a beta stage before they can promote to the next phase. So let's say, for instance, if Sidecar ambient interrupt, right now, I don't think we are at alpha. I don't even remember. I think it might be alpha. I can't remember the status. So we can't promote it from alpha to GA. That doesn't make any sense to anybody when you don't have like at least 1 or 2 releases, allow user to testing it, right? So the ones we can promote to GA would have to be the ones already in beta, if that makes sense. Certainly, this is not to say we can promote Sidecar interrupt to the next phase in the next release if there are people willing to do work and promote that, but it probably doesn't make sense to jump like 2 phases.
I think one of the things that to maybe add some clarity, one of the things I pushed for back when we were doing the whole ambient to beta effort was to try to get out of the habit of calling ambient as a whole beta. I think that might be a source of some of the confusion. I don't know that it's feasible to call the entirety of the ambient data plane mode stable, because in the context of the STO project, that can be confusing for users, because stable means, oh, all the stuff that needs to sidecars is now equally stable in ambient. But I wouldn't be opposed to kind of what Lynn was saying. All the things that we went to beta in the previous release, those are now stable. I think that makes a ton of sense, given some bake time, fixing bugs, those sorts of things, and an additional performance requirements. I think that was explicitly something in the beta conversation that we said it was fine to wait until GA to get to more rigorous performance testing. Want to make sure we get that tackled.
Yeah, that's right. By the way, we did have performance test. I just want to show people. Does anybody remember where our performance page is? Is it on the operation or?
It's somewhere under there. I'm not sure where.
We're getting
I
live
completely
proof
agree
of
with.
refresh. Of the need to refresh the web page.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I
Go
completely
ahead.
agree with Keith, and I think Costin's saying he agrees as well. Like, I agree. It's easy to say ambient, but like what we're saying is not every feature under the sun of ambient. We're saying some set of ambient, the core of ambient, and we can debate what's in that core, which is important. Yeah, right now, what is being proposed is what was in beta, which is basically the core. You get waypoints and Z. There's the things you don't get: multi-cluster DNS processing, interoperability, all this other stuff. So I agree. We just need to be clear on what it is and what isn't beta. Like ambient's like a whole new, like it could have been a whole new Istio 2.0 or something. Like it's like a big thing. So it makes sense to not have just one row on the feature status page of of whether it's stable or not, right? We'll have I think we already do on the feature status page have a section of like ambient, and within that there'll be like the core components, stable, multi-network, experimental, or alpha, or whatever, like, each feature broken down. So I agree we need to do that. So this is really, I think what we're saying is whether we're taking the core part of it and promoting that to GA, or not whether. Will happen eventually. It's more about when and what, right?
I think I can get behind that, but I do see a lot of things in this list that are not features, such as a formal third-party audit for security and penetration testing, certificate revocation behavior. Those are things that I would consider to be prerequisites to calling a product generally available or stable.
Sorry, you said, like, I agree with the first one, Mitch, but you said the magic word certificate revocation.
We don't support it for
that's one of the
sidecar,
tests
do we?
burning
Yeah.
bottom of the-
Yeah, we have never supported certificate revocation, and sidecars either, right? There's a right. We don't
Because
do
we use
CRLs.
short-lived. We use short-lived
Yeah.
certificates as well.
Yeah. Now, if you meant certificate rotation and root material rotation live in production, and removing trust of a root trust bundle, right? The big hammer. I think that works.
Okay, I'm picking it up from the list down there at P1. I'm not exactly sure what was intended from that particular item.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing that and thinking it was misplaced on there, but didn't care enough to fight for removing it. The one
Okay,
is.
let me remove it, find it, and make a note.
I mean, we don't need to go back to remove
Just put a comment in the doc. Did we
Yeah, put
actually
a
mean, like,
comment.
CRL?
Yeah,
It doesn't. I don't even know where it came from. And Keith, to answer your question, like, Z-tunnels do not support CRLs, nor will they ever. And for those of you looking at the public internet, right, most major browsers deprecated support for CRL a long time ago.
Yeah, plus one of that, I was thinking about. I remember recalling seeing CRL support.
Yeah. Envoy
and,
supports CRL for like gateway cases to make some
gateway cases is what I was thinking of. Yeah. It would be nice to get OCS. What is it? The OSCS, OSCP, whatever the thing is.
stuff?
Like, yeah, that would be good
That's
to
also-
get into
that's
Istio
also
generally. I would
deprecated.
think.
It's also
Already?
deprecated. Yeah.
It's also not in sidecars, so.
Yeah, it's also not inside.
Yeah, I'm
Also,
saying for
even if
sidecars.
even
I'm
if it
saying
wasn't a
generic.
feature, I don't think, in my opinion at least, any way that feature is correlated to whether we promote the core to GA.
Yeah.
Yes,
That is
sorry,
a
I'm thinking
niche feature that I
generally
think we should do,
sidecars
but
in
even if we
Istio.
should, yeah.
Yeah, we can take up OCSP stapling offline, but yeah, that's a funny one.
So then as for pen testing, do we have as far as I know, we've not had a third-party audit or security exam for ambient.
Didn't Justin organize a preliminary one as part of doing the security blog back a while back?
I don't remember that.
Do I have that backwards?
I think we're still not on the same page on what we define. I mean, my what I was trying to say is that what is stable is the API surface and the one implementation of those APIs. Stable doesn't mean that it supports some feature. I mean, features, again, how they are implemented, or if we have penetration testing, that doesn't affect the stability of the implementation. Scalability may be a factor, but even that, it's stable up to X QPS.
I would
But
push back a little bit on that for security testing like that. If you're talking about making something like beta, completely agree. But stable, we have it organized in Istio that way, I think, for a reason. Like stable is ahead of beta because you're not just production ready. I think the word we use in our documentation is hardened. And with that, I would expect some sort of security testing.
Yeah, I agree with I agree with the idea of what Keith said. It's like, in general, something like an audit would be not necessarily a feature, but a proof to ourselves and to others that we've actually met the bar for security. Now, whether it's actually needed to do that and whether it's useful, that's a whole nother question. I'm not necessarily convinced. Usually, in my experience, the audits done by third parties in the CNCF space, at least, or box checking exercise and a marketing exercise, they have missed many glaring issues in all the projects that they analyze, and they just find stupid things like you didn't put a comment next to using MD5 when it's clearly not in a security sensitive area, and things like that. I agree, like we need to go make sure it's secure. I'm not sure that a third-party audit is required to do that. If someone wants to pay for one, I mean, I wouldn't mind it.
So we can ask the CNCF to fund one, right, as we have done in the past.
Yeah, we could. I'm not sure the timeline though. Like, how long would it take? And also, is it correct, Louis? We didn't had one until we go to incubation and graduation for Istio, like a year.
Istio,
we had
Istio
one
had
for
one
graduation.
before.
So I've linked it right here. This was what we published in late 2020 or early 2023 in order to graduate later on that year.
Right, but my point was Istio was GA way before that, right? The whole Istio was GA since 1.1.
Istio had one before that, prior to incubation, a separate one that was done about.
I remember that too.
Quite a while ago now.
Yeah.
I've forgotten who the vendor was. It was one of the vendors who worked with the CNCF, but Google paid them independently, I believe. I agree with John. They tend not to find the pressing security concerns. So it is more of a marketing exercise, but it's a reasonable, like, we should kick it off.
Yeah.
Whether we gate GA on it, it's marketing window dressing for the most part. I most largely agree with John about that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't hurt to have it.
Yeah, let me take a to-do and work with Craig to see if we can engage CNCF for this, unless any of your company is willing to fund that, so we can get the process kicked off. I suspect it will take quite a while, given our experience in the past working with audit, CNCF process and everything. But it's good data for us to have, and certainly good marketing anyway, so we need to do as a project. But I would agree, not hold up the claiming stable production ready GA for it, because we haven't been holding Istio in for SICA for that.
Yeah, we're very careful to use the word stable too, right? I want to make sure we stick to the right
GA.
I mean, the official word on the website of feature stage is stable. So
that is right.
I know the word is problematic, but GA is also problematic given that anyone can access experimental code in an open source project. So there's not really a good word in the industry for what we're saying.
So on the security side, I've been spending last few weeks, months reviewing the code and looking for security and stability and kind of this kind of stuff. I mean, the certificate stuff, the secrets, and there are a few other things that I'm still looking at. You know, John, probably we discussed many times about main risk for Ambient and for Istio, which is IP instability when you know, the IP is reallocated, which is not very well documented still, and you know, the DNS security implication and all the other things. I'm not entirely sure how. I mean, the previous reviews kind of missed those points, and I haven't seen them mentioned. So it's probably you know, it requires someone with enough expertise in Istio to document the security posture and all the known or possible and theoretical limitations that we have, which again, they exist. We know about them. It's not like they are secret. It's just that we know between, you know, the few of us. And have a clear documentation of the possible risk. I mean, secure DNS, you know, say service entry, cross namespace, all the other stuff that impacts Ambient, just like impacts Sidecar. And while it's a security risk, it's not well explained, and a third party will have hard time finding it because they don't know where the skeletons are hidden, basically.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, if in my ideal world, what we would have is a document written by us that is, here is the security properties of the system. Some other projects have this. And, you know, here's what happens if the node is compromised. Here's what happens if, I don't know, the control plane's cut off and just MTLS properties still hold, like things like that. And like, here are the security guarantees that we're actually offering and that whatnot. That would be nice. In terms of auditing, like, if it's easy to say, like, I'll go look through the code and see if there's any issues, but I also wrote the code, so a lot of it. So like, it's not really fair. I don't think the third-party auditors do a great job either, but there's probably people at some of the companies on this call that have very good security people. If they want to go take a look, like, that would be useful, I think, more than the auditing, like the third-party auditors. I don't know how much of the senior Kubernetes security folks at Google or Microsoft want to go invest time looking at zTunnel code. But if they did, like, that would be awesome.
So I think maybe, you know, I see someone's written decision down at the bottom. I would like, I think similar to what Costin said, I'd like to have a sort of burn down list that we can agree on of what stable means, and then we can go from there. If we meet our burn down list in 124, awesome, call it stable. If we don't meet our burn down list, then we're not stable in 124. Talking about it before we begin the work on 124, or I guess technically just as it's begun, since the branch cut did happen like 2 weeks ago, seems a little bit premature since we don't know exactly what's going to be shipping in November. And I would rather have it defined by doneness rather than defined by just at some date we're going to sort of wave the done flag.
And to that point, Mitch, I think it might be having that burn down list is going to help not ward off. What am I trying to say? I think it'll help bring clarity to the inevitable KubeCon's coming up in a couple of days. Can we have something ready? It's like every KubeCon, there's always been that conversation. I think a burn down list will help kind of guide what we make available for KubeCon Rail.
Yeah, just as we did for beta, right?
Yeah, I'm happy to be the central person again, you know, start a list and ask you all for input, what you think is critical from the existing features that's already in beta. What are the things we would like to continue to improve, or any of the critical bugs user reported should be resolved before we can claim this thing to be GA. John, go ahead.
Yeah, I think like what we need to do is just figure out what we agree on and then figure out what we need to decide. So the core claim that we're making that I haven't, it sounds like there's agreement, but let's check, is that what we were proposing is targeting to release the core set of features of Ambient, which we currently did in the beta release, to stable at some point. And then in addition, we're going to put some other requirements that we need to decide, like, do we need an audit for that? Do we need to write a security model document? Do we need to write a formal protocol definition? do we at least have agreement on this first part, and then we just have to debate on what other aspects we need?
I think so.
All right, let's record that.
I do want to make sure that it's said that I'm happy that we're doing this, and part of the reason I'm happy is that it's above and beyond for what I think some other projects do. So I think having those extra documentations of protocols, threat modeling, detailed threat modeling, all those sorts of things, I think helps to make Istio boring and sets us apart. So +1 to adding that to our stability goals.
You're not saying we should just YOLO everything, Keith, and just call everything GA right now?
No, yeah, call it all GA. Yeah, I'll stop.
Okay, so then there's another track, which is, hey, what features would we like? Do we think it's important to bring to beta? Right, which, you know, there should be a discussion about that as well. Like a parallel track, obviously, that there are some well-known things in there that, you know, like features that we hear users want that are currently out for development only. We should run a project management process for those as well. And then we can decide how to balance effort between those two things.
So I'm not sure how this fits into the bringing to beta versus going to GA discussion, generally speaking, but I know Ben brought up some concern about our install and upgrade API. Having spoken with Ben, I'm guessing, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you're talking about tags and the needs to have the requirement that basically Ambient users create mutating webhooks that we won't actually use or do anything with in order to do upgrades. Is that what you're referencing?
That's maybe part of it, but I was more talking about like we had talked last meeting about whether the getting started should be Istio control or Helm. I think we settled on Istio control, but also Istio control may implement Helm under the hood. Whatever we do there, I would like to get that hashed out before we say stable, so that we don't, for instance, say, oh, Istio control is the stable way to install Ambient, but it's using the old operator stuff under the hood. And if we change that tomorrow, when you go to upgrade from the operator Istio control to the Helm Istio control, you got to do weird stuff. I just want to make sure that stuff is really simple before, like I would consider that a prerequisite, right? The getting started guide should be unambiguous. Getting started should have one way to do it. The upgrade should also do that. We should test that, and we shouldn't have changes on the horizon planned for that might make it hard for people to upgrade. Because I don't want to get in a situation where people have to do something weird during upgrade, right? Because we've changed, we picked Istio control, but we changed how Istio control does it under the hood, right? So I would consider that stuff a prerequisite to stable, I think, personally, just so we get that stuff tested and out of the way and well exercised before we get to that point. Since that stuff is like a little bit in flux right now. That's my only concern there. But yeah, also the tag and webhook stuff would be nice. But I guess I'm less concerned about that, because I think if we have the pure in-place upgrade guide anyway, which I think John had already mentioned we probably need, right? That's fine. Like that's at least a baseline, and like that could be good. I don't necessarily care about the tag versus other part, as long as we have an alternate method that isn't that. I can live with that being a little wonky for now.
By the way, just
Okay, so
looking at our doc, what's in scope for beta, we only claim Helm install is beta for Ambient. It's still
That's kind of that's
started.
kind of what I was talking about. It's like in that, if that is like what we said before, then if the quick start should be Istio control and not this, but also there's some debate about how we break, if we want to consolidate the Helm charts, which we talked about last week too, then those instructions would change. And I would like to get that stuff locked down as a prerequisite for going GA, so people don't have to figure out which version of the install doc they're going to once we do that. Like in beta, that's fine, but once you get to GA, like I would expect the install docs to not change much. And if we can guarantee that, then we're good. But I just want to make sure that we're thinking about that.
Italy, you can go first.
Okay, yeah. So the type of thing you mentioned, Ben, and it's a kind of category of stuff is like technical debt that we would rather not have to carry forward into the stable universe.
Or at least not expose our users to in the install guide, yes, or upgrades, yes.
Yes, right. So that if it's not documented, it doesn't exist and it's not stable. Are there other? So it's kind of like this is the we have a limited budget of wish list technical debt things that we could pay down for stable. Obviously, install being a very obvious one because it has a very high impact. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Are there others? And so, Lynn, in your document, there should probably be a kind of debt pay down section for stable, right? For things that would have a lasting benefit on the product, that if they were included, but they technically don't have to be included because, well, they are what they are right now, for the strict definition of progression. So I think it makes sense to do that. And if people have suggestions for other high impact debt pay downs, it's a pretty high bar if you want to get your item on the list. Right? I think we would all agree Ben's item probably should be on the list, but if there are others, it would certainly be interesting to hear them. John?
Yeah, I was just gonna try and wrap up. Like, we have a few minutes left. We got agreement on this, which is good, but we have a lot of open questions on what are the things in addition to that we need to check off, and when to make sure that we can drive that to completion. Is there a way we want to do this? Like, we kind of threw out a bunch of ideas. We could just have everyone list out what they feel are the things they want to see and try and do a merge of all of them and reconcile it. We could keep discussing. I would do worry if we just have another meeting discussing. We tend to talk a lot and not drive towards decisions. So my pitch would be that everyone writes what they think are the requirements, and then we can try and reconcile those, but I'm open to other ideas as well.
Plus one to doing this asynchronously and getting to a finalist. My recommendations would be to, one, try to time box it and have like well, I'm getting ahead of myself. My recommendation would be to time box it to where like we're gonna have the set of things considered by X date, so we have enough time to be able to actually execute on it. My other suggestion would be to, I think this worked really well in Ambient Alpha. I think it'd be great to have more like a project board and milestone planning for some of this. I think during beta it was kind of difficult to know what the exact status was and correlate the top level initiatives and objectives with GitHub issues. I would like to move to something like that again, and I'm happy to volunteer time to keep it up to date and kind of coordinate like that. I also think TOC would be a great group to be kind of in charge of that. But I think that'll help with visibility and getting folks involved, especially people who aren't kind of in the in-group who attend this meeting every week, to be able to see what needs to be worked on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how about this? Let me start the doc first, and then you guys can all add in what's technical debt, what's critical for you believe to drive Ambient to GA on the set of the features that's already in beta. And then, Keith, since you volunteer to the board, maybe we'll have you help. I can help you too. Then we can manage the board also, so we can engage the rest of the community too. I do think we need to move to the board. I just felt it might be a little bit easy to have a centralized document, because we actually find the beta document was useful in today's discussion too. So.
Yeah, I think a doc is great for kind of tackling the high level goals plus one to keeping that. I think as far as like the actual like executing on it is where a board might be more helpful. So I think we're in agreement.
Okay, cool. And Louis just mentioned there's a TOC meeting. So so how about this? I'll start the doc. So we have a doc today, and then for the rest of this week, you all can pile in next Monday's TOC meeting. Let's continue the discussion. Hopefully can drive some consensus by then. And by the way, just so everyone knows, the TOC meeting is open to everyone. We do encourage everybody to join. So last time, I think it is just 4 or 5 of us. So please do join if you are available on Monday. I believe it's at 11 a.m. Eastern.
Or
Yeah,
the,
so I
the time
propose-
changed. I want to make sure folks were aware of that. It's actually at 11 Eastern and 8 Pacific. It
Yeah,
was
1
an hour later.
hour earlier.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
Whitney, I think you joined right after we ended. So apologies for that.
Yeah, so I was going to say, let's try to get a draft this week. We'll review it in TOC on Monday. It will go through some refinement. We'll review it again in this meeting the week after. And then the TOC should try to ratify it by the following week, or even the end of that week, as at least a high level, right? It's always a moving target anyway, so we're never going to get 100% right up front. We should be able to get close to 80 or 90%.
Cool.
All right, sounds good. Thanks everybody for the wonderful discussion. See you all
Take care, everyone.
later. Bye.
Thank you.
Hey, Stephen. Oh, that was probably an accident. See you all.
Yeah, I wanted to do a thumbs up and then I pressed the hands up.
Okay, no worries. Thanks. Bye.